I'm very much attracted to old things. I like things with a history and a long tradition, even if it means learning the rules to break them or subvert them to feel as comfortable in my stage outfits as I do in a three-piece suit. Hey there! I'm back for the second entry in my Diary of an American Koto Musician Living in Japan. And this is my Halloween costume. So happy Halloween, everyone! Last time we left off with my departure for Japan, so if you haven't seen part 1, please give that a watch sometime. But if you're watching for the first time, my name is Robert. I am a musician. I moved from Florida in the United States to Yokohama, Japan, to study the koto, a Japanese stringed instrument, with the goal of eventually receiving my Jun Shihan Koto degree. Now, you all submitted a bunch of great questions last time, which I'm going to answer at the end of this video. And if anyone has any questions for me about life in Japan, music, or any topic really, leave them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them in the next video. Alright, so I arrived in Japan on January 6th, 2019, spent my first night in a hotel, and then met the share house manager the next morning to sign my contract. So for my first couple of months, before I even started koto lessons, I was just getting my bearings, settling in at my job, learning the language, just getting used to life, because I'd never lived in a big city before. And sometimes I get asked, what was the biggest change you experienced moving to Japan? But I think a large part of the change was just due to living in a big city for the first time, rather than anything specifically Japan-oriented. So walking, taking public transportation, rather than driving everywhere. Now, a little about the Japanese koto schools. So there are two main schools of traditional koto music, Ikuta Ryu and Yamada Ryu. And there are a number of differences. First, the repertoire. So Ikuta Ryu compositions are often centered on shamisen, which is another traditional instrument, and the tegoto, which is a long instrumental section in the song, contains these advanced musical techniques, whereas the Yamada Ryu compositions are more centered on the vocals, with a focus on narrative components, or katarimono. Another difference is the shape of the picks. So Ikuta Ryu is square, and Yamada Ryu picks come to sort of a rounded point. And there are a number of other differences, including the angle you sit at relative to the koto when you're playing. As a matter of fact, one of the things I had to study for my koto exam was this chart with all these differences between the two schools. So, within each of those two major schools, there are different branches and smaller groups. My school is Seiha, and Seiha is Ikuta Ryu. It was founded in 1913 in Nagano. The 110th anniversary concert is actually next week at NHK Hall. And I would say that Seiha is on the more traditional side. So there's a focus on a lot of classical songs, though we do learn quite a few modern compositions as well. And one thing about Seiha is that they emphasize learning music theory and applying that to koto music. So that includes transposing from traditional koto score to staff paper, and also knowing the different tunings, scales, intervals, and thinking about them in terms of music theory. There's also an emphasis on the history of traditional Japanese music, as well as the history and structure of Seiha. Another example of an Ikutoryu school would be the Sawai School of Koto. They have an international presence as well, so you'll see a lot of Sawai teachers, and you'll run into a lot of songs written by Tadao Sawai. And one thing that attracted me to Koto music is the connection to a larger tradition, a specific set way of doing things, and especially the differentiation between the schools. So, for instance, I'd hear musicians say, oh, Seiha does things this way, whereas XYZ school does things this way. Or in Seiha, we do this playing technique a little more like this. And there's something I absolutely love about that. And, there is some irony that the guy from the rock band who had pink hair and is currently wearing a French maid outfit from Don Quixote would get his teaching license from the more traditional of the Koto schools. But the way I present myself notwithstanding, I'm very much attracted to old things. I like things with a history and a long tradition. Even if it means learning the rules to break them or subvert them, I very much like to learn those rules and learn the proper way to do things. So I need to feel as comfortable in my stage outfits as I do in a three-piece suit. Now, seeing as I came here on a work visa to work full-time, I couldn't attend regular classes at Seiha, so I started working toward my degree by taking private lessons each week with a Seiha teacher in Yokohama. So this was early 2019. But eventually I started taking lessons with Okuda Utanoichi sensei, who is a very good koto performer and also a composer. And having the opportunity to learn from him has been an incredible privilege and one of the highlights of not only my life in Japan, but my life as a musician. So I'll link to one of his songs, Ballade, in the description. It's one of my all-time favorite koto songs, so please give that a listen. So at that time, I settled into a day-to-day life of practicing koto, teaching private English lessons, studying Japanese, and taking weekly Japanese lessons. And in my free time, I would look up different ramen shops and walk to them. And eventually, one of the guys at my share house introduced me to a few bars that I became a regular at. So, one thing to note, the walls of my share house are very thin, so practicing koto for several hours a day when I have people living on either side of me is not ideal. So instead I practiced, and I still do, at a nearby karaoke place. It's a small family-owned place, and they are generous enough to let me store my koto there for a small fee each month. This is my second koto. My main performance koto is at the karaoke place now. And that's a huge help, especially during the rainy months. But the initial months when I had to carry my koto back and forth every day to practice were challenging. So fast forward a few years, there were a lot of ups and downs. COVID happened. I got COVID, so I got to experience a stay at one of the lodging facilities for my birthday, which is a story in and of itself. I had to call my house manager to report that I had tested positive for COVID. And the runaround I had to go through to get tested was more frustrating than actually recovering from the illness. Because my regular clinic wouldn't see me because I had COVID symptoms and they didn't want me to travel there. So the share house management arranged with the local government for this white van to pull up to the share house and take me away to a repurposed hotel where they were isolating COVID patients. And so I'm separated from the driver by this plastic sheet. We pull up to the hotel entrance and they direct me to walk down this hall with my suitcase. I really need to fix this before Halloween. So the walls of this winding hallway are draped in those semi-opaque plastic sheets like some horror movie or a low-budget haunted house. So I enter the completely empty hotel lobby and I'm standing there looking around. And everyone is isolating in their rooms on different floors, so there's a stillness. And combined with the plastic-wrapped hallway I just walked down, it felt like a zombie apocalypse, like that scene at the beginning of 28 Days Later, where the guy is walking around and everything is empty. So I'm taking this all in, and then the phone on the counter starts ringing. So I answer, and a voice tells me to pick up the envelope labeled 904, which is my room number. So I follow the instructions, get my key, get into the room, and basically I stayed there for about a week. I had to register on my Line account to confirm my health condition every day, my temperature, heart rate, and blood oxygen saturation. And I think a nurse called every day as well. But I experienced the worst of the COVID back when I was still isolating in my room at the share house. I did lose my smell and taste, and I got a fever. But by the time I was at the hotel, I was starting to feel better. So I just brought my laptop and replayed System Shock 2 in the dark. And it was one of the most memorable gaming experiences of my life. If you've never played that game, I think Night Dive is doing a remaster of it. But I played the GOG version with mods, I think. 3 times a day, they would announce over the speakers which rooms were allowed to come down and get their meals. So everyone would shamble down to the lobby to stand in line, all masked up. The bento were incredible. I guess they got the boxed lunches from these really good restaurants. And those were the best bento I've ever had in my life, bar none. And that was my experience getting COVID in Japan. And after the detour that was COVID, I went back to working towards my Koto degree. Utanoichi sensei was really encouraging me to take my exam in February of this year, so this past February. But I'm going to save that for the next video and move on to the Q&A. So thank you all so much for your questions. So first, Samar asked, would you help me figure out a budget of what my monthly costs may be in Japan? Alright, so this will vary greatly depending on city. And I know you'll be living in Tokyo, but it will also vary greatly depending on what groceries you buy, how often you go out to eat, whether you like to go out at night, and so on. So I recommend going to a website called numbeo.com or numbeo.com. I don't know how it's pronounced, but that website not only has a crowdsource cost of living estimate for each city, but it also has a breakdown of the cost of individual groceries, food items, meals, just about everything you could want for each city. So if we go to Tokyo, you see that a single person's estimated monthly costs are 126,497 yen without rent. So that's $844.24 as of October 20th, 2023. But it's more useful to look at what you buy for groceries and what you do for meals and do those calculations yourself. Now, Samar, I know you're going as a student, so some of this may not apply to you, but I do want to point out a few other costs that some of you may have to think about if you move here. I mentioned that my rent, utilities, maintenance, and internet are all bundled together for 77,000 yen a month, or about $514. My health insurance is currently 21,700 yen a month. That's about 145 US dollars a month. Now that does not cover dental costs for me unless I am mistaken. But doctor appointments are very inexpensive. Now for my pension, I pay 16,520 yen a month, so $110 a month. The pension system is a whole topic in and of itself, which I may cover in another video. But yes, I do pay into the pension system. And if you are planning to move to Japan for any length of time, that's something you'll have to do the research on. Okay, then I'm currently paying in yearly taxes 123,400 yen. So that's $824 a year. And that's split up into 4 smaller bills of about 30,000 yen each. So 4 times a year, I pay a little over $200 each time. So those are other costs you'll need to keep in mind if you are thinking about moving to Japan. All right, next question. Darth Raider, hello, asks, have you traveled anywhere outside Yokohama for a brief holiday? If not, where would you love to go if you could? Okay. So last autumn, I went hiking in Nikko with some of my friends, as you can see referenced in another comment on the last video. So I'll include some pictures here. It was really beautiful. And I alluded to this in my last video, but I generally don't like to go to places unless I have a specific reason to be there. I love to travel, I love to see unfamiliar places, but usually only when it's part of some larger goal. I don't know why, that's just how I'm wired, and maybe that perspective will change someday. Mostly, I think I just can't be bothered making travel plans and coming up with an itinerary and figuring out where to go. I did go to Osaka, but that was to play a show. And while I was there, I ate some delicious takoyaki, which is one of the foods that Osaka is known for, along with okonomiyaki. So if you go there, be sure to try that. I visited the famous Dotonbori area, and I went to Nagano for my Koto exam, and I visited Zenkoji, a beautiful temple. And in my next video, I'll go into detail about my experience preparing for and taking that exam. So where would I like to go? I'd like to visit Kyoto, but more than anything, I'd probably like to visit some sake, Nihonshu breweries while I'm still in Japan. Maybe some wineries in Yamanashi. So there you have it. Also that forest, that area that the forest from Princess Mononoke is based off of. That would be nice as well. So, alright. A follow-up to Josh's question from last time. Yes, I did try the caffeinated ramen, but it was late at night and I ate it without adding any water, so I ate it dry. After I'd finished eating it, I realized I forgot to add the sauce, so I ate the sauce separately. And that's definitely not how the ramen was intended to be consumed, but it was delicious nonetheless. They were out of the ramen last time I checked, but as it turns out, they also make caffeinated keema curry. And finally, Casey McGee asked, are you thinking about going to Florida to visit or waiting until you're done with school? Well, I am done with school. That wrapped up in February. My work visa expires in January of 2025. I have not decided whether to renew it or not. If I decide to leave Japan in 2025, I probably won't visit before then. And whether I continue to stay in Japan now that I've accomplished my goal of getting the Koto degree depends on a lot of different factors. And I'm going to get into those in the next video as well. So please stay tuned for next time. So, as I mentioned, Seiha has its 110th anniversary concert next week on October 26th at NHK Hall. So I've been preparing for that these past months. I'm playing in 2 songs. The first is Raden, which was composed by Tadao Sawai, and the second song I'm playing in is the premiere of Fugaku, a new composition written by my teacher. It has 4 movements, it's about 20 minutes long in total. There are flute and voice parts, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be a part of that performance. So recently I also recorded some songs for the Seiha YouTube channel. I was not wearing this, I was wearing my 3-piece suit, and I'll let you know when those are up. So, alright, if you have any questions about music, life in Japan, or just about anything else, please leave them in the comments and I will answer them at the end of the next video. I'm going to try and release these about once every 2 weeks. Then on the off weeks, I'm going to re-upload some of the old Koto songs I recorded back in 2018 in the US. And you can hear one of them playing in the background now, as a matter of fact. But I thought it would be nice to have them on this channel as well. Kind of get everything in the same place. And that'll give you something to listen to on the weeks when I don't upload one of these. So please like and subscribe and click on the notification bell. Everyone have a happy Halloween. And thank you. I will see you next time.